Good evening, everyone. Hopefully, you're having a wonderful day so far. I got a good one for you today. So, I've seen a lot of on the interwebs that there's been a lot of names being flown around for the new Liberal leader. We're talking Christy Clark, Mark Carney, Jean Charest, and right now it seems the two most prominent ones are Christy Clark and Mark Carney. So, from the CBC News, they have a couple of interviews with them. So, for that, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. And with no further ado, let's get into it.
The field of contenders for the Liberal Party leadership is narrowing, and a big name is expected to throw his hat into the ring very soon. A source has told CBC News that former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney could announce next week that he will run for the leadership of the party, and that dozens of MPs already back him. Meanwhile, former BC Premier Christy Clark appears poised to make a bid herself for the top job for the Liberals, but she faces questions over whether she is a true Liberal herself. CBC's Linda Ward has more.
A source close to the campaign tells us that Mark Carney will enter the race sometime late next week. That source also says that he has some 30 MPs who are backing him. Some of those MPs had initially intended to throw their support behind Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc, but when LeBlanc said that he wasn't going to run, they shifted their support to Mark Carney. Now, Trudeau tried unsuccessfully to get Carney to join the Liberal Party ranks over the years. He was brought in to chair a task force on economic growth last September. He's got the support, he's got the ability to raise the money, and pollster Daryl Bricker says he'll likely try to bill himself as being a candidate that is outside the Trudeau government.
Well, I think it's one thing you could say is that he's a political outsider. I think the Conservatives would be claiming that he's very much a political insider and has been part of what Justin Trudeau's thinking has been all through his administration. So I think we'll have an interesting battle between the Conservatives and, if he does win the leadership of the party, between the Liberals over exactly what Mark Carney's past was.
He says it's shaping up to be a pretty serious race with some pretty strong contenders, and it's heating up before some are even out of the gate. Former BC.
So I'm not particularly sure why Mark Carney would even want to throw his name in, at least for this upcoming election, because it's just going to be a dumpster fire for multiple reasons for the Liberal Party. I mean, you're coming off of the back of one of the worst polling numbers that the Liberals have ever had. You're coming off of, I think, the worst leader that the Liberals have ever had, and a bad economy, and just everything. I don't know why you just wouldn't wait until the next election, not this one coming up. Then you can pose as the savior of the Liberal Party or something, because right now Trudeau has destroyed the Liberals so much. There's no coming back from it, at least in the next 4 years. If we look at Mark Carney's sort of background of who this guy is, and this is just a Coles Notes Wikipedia version, it kind of seems to me it makes sense why the Conservatives call this guy Carbon Tax Carney, because this is what it says. So, Mark Joseph Carney is a Canadian economist and banker who served as the 8th governor of the Bank of Canada and then the governor for the Bank of England. He was the chair and head of impact investing at Brookfield's Assessment Management since 2020. So he's got some big friends in the banking industry. He was a chairman at Bloomberg. He was the chairman at Financial Stability Board. And then at the very end, it says he also serves, as the UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance. So he's a climate action guy as well for the UN, so meaning globalist, and we're coming off of the back of another globalist called Trudeau, so things will just get worse if we get Carbon Tax Carney in here. I believe, and if we vote him in.
Premier Christy Clark hasn't even formally entered the race, but she's facing some tough questions, denying that she was once a member of the Conservative Party. In 2022, Clark said that she would join the Conservative Party in order to vote for Jean Charest during the Conservative leadership race to stop Pierre Poilievre. A party spokesperson says Clark did buy a membership, but that it's no longer active. But Clark insisted in this interview with Catherine Cullen from CBC Radio's The House that she never followed through on it.
Never.
But you voted in the race, did you not?
No, I didn't. And I never got a membership, and I never got a ballot. What I did, though,
I will say, Christy Clark, we reached out to the Conservative Party, who told us, in fact, that your membership was canceled.
Oh, well, why don't they come out and show my membership or my ballot? They never sent me any of those, although I wouldn't put it past them to manufacture one of them.
And after that interview, the Conservative Party sent a screenshot that appears to show that Clark was a member of the Conservative Party from June 2022 until June 2023. Clark took to social media last night with this mea culpa, saying, well, I misspoke. Expletive happens, lesson learned. I've always been clear that I supported Jean Charest to stop Pierre Poilievre. She goes on to say, I'm thinking carefully about running because he still needs to be stopped. Well, she, along with the other Conservative hopefuls, won't have much time to decide whether to enter the race.
Yeah, so if you don't know Christy Clark, I didn't either. I had to look her up and do a little bit of research on her, and she was BC Premier from 2011 to 2017. So she had a big interview with CBC about the carbon tax and what she thought about that. So apparently in her reign as Premier, she brought in BC's carbon tax. And she says that Trudeau, the way he's doing his, is not the way to actually do it. So let's get into that interview.
Do you believe in carbon taxes?
I don't think we should keep the carbon tax that the federal government has. I think that the Trudeau carbon tax isn't working. It's very different from what we did in British Columbia and what Gordon Campbell introduced in our province. You know, when I was the Premier of British Columbia, we took that carbon tax that had a series of automatic increases, and we got to about $30 in my tenure. And I said, you know, I'm concerned, first of all, that this is starting to really impact families. And second, I was concerned that it was hurting our competitiveness with the rest of the country and therefore going to have an impact on people's jobs. So we froze the tax at that point. But I mean, I won't take the 15 minutes or 20 minutes it would take to explain exactly how it was different, but it was
Yeah, how about you take that 15 minutes and break it down into simple pieces for all of the listeners so they can know how different your tax is to how different Trudeau's tax is. Even if it's a little bit different, it sounds like it did the exact same thing because you froze it. And this is her words, is she froze it because she realized that it was hurting families. And what is Trudeau's tax doing right now? It's hurting families. Terrifying slow. And the only difference is Trudeau's just keep on going. It'll work. It'll work. And Canadians are resilient. They'll get through this.
Very different from what the Trudeau government has implemented in a carbon tax. And should I be elected leader of the party and prime minister of the country, we would scrap that tax.
Are you going to offer an alternative plan to drive down emissions, though?
Absolutely. Because unlike Pierre Poilievre, I believe that climate change is happening and that as human beings, we are part of the problem and we need to address emissions. So absolutely, we want to make sure that Canada is playing the biggest role that it can in the world to contribute to the global, what's really a global problem. And, I think that's going to be a very different approach from the Poilievre Conservatives. a carbon tax isn't the only answer to fighting climate change. There is a whole range of other tools in the toolbox, and we would be committing to figuring out which tools we want to put to work, but also with a mind to making sure that they aren't things that will hold people back, that will hurt our economy, that will kill jobs in the country. Because it is possible, and we proved it in BC when we had the fastest growing economy in the country and the only, and a carbon tax in our province. We proved that you can find a balance between investment, growth, jobs, and making sure we're finding a way to fight climate change.
Until it wasn't, and then you started to realize that your carbon tax was hurting people in your province. And she didn't even scrap the tax, she just paused it at 30. So I'm not quite sure if I'm ready to believe that she would be any better than Justin Trudeau. She just bring in a different type of tax. So she's running on the exact same rhetoric as any other Liberal government. So this is on Power and Politics. They're kind of breaking down everything Christine Clark has said and their interviews and how she's going to run and explain all of this stuff to Liberal voters.
Okay, this is it. All right, so that's the past. There is this future race. I mean, she's going to have to explain this to Liberals, but how does she plan to sell herself to Liberals as a potential leader should she go ahead and make the plunge?
Yeah, and it's interesting. This is actually the first interview she's given since the Prime Minister resigned. Right. She says she's seriously thinking about running. She certainly sounded like she was campaigning. David, a couple of policy points that came out in this. She said she would cancel what she called the Trudeau carbon tax, saying it was different than what they did provincially in British Columbia and that the plan needed to be scrapped. We also, I talked to her about how would she go about driving emissions down. She said a plan was coming in that regard. Other big issue, as you can imagine, that we talked about is Donald Trump, because of course that is going to hang over Canadian politics, the Liberal leadership race. She argues that she is best positioned to take on Donald Trump because she has so much experience in office. She also said it is important that Canada not, in her words, fold like a cheap suit in the face of Donald Trump's threats around tariffs and also becoming a 51st state, which she said, that's clearly not a joke.
Okay, Catherine, that's not what I expected when you said you were interviewing Christy Clark today, but thanks for being here. This is CBC's Catherine Cullen. Okay, so we now have the rules for this race to choose the next Liberal leader, and of course...
So it's pretty much the typical rundown of Liberal talking points. That's what I kind of gained from this interview with Christy Clark, though I think the CBC really pretty good. So let's see how she gets out of this scrum, because if she navigates through this pretty well, I think it'll be impressive, to say the least.
Of course, the next Prime Minister of Canada. According to the party's national executive, the vote will happen and results will be announced on the 9th of March. The entry fee for potential candidates is $350,000. Candidates need to commit to running by January 23rd, and the cutoff to sign up voters is January the 27th.
And this stuff we
Party
already know.
Executives also decided who can cast a vote for the new Liberal leader. Voters must be Canadian citizens, have status under the Indian Act, or be permanent residents of Canada. They also must be over the age of 14.
So any of you voters, if you're over the age of 14, apparently you can vote for the Liberal Party. I wasn't very politically savvy when I was 14. I was more thinking about girls and Legos, but, who am I to judge? But what do you guys think about Mark Carney and Christy Clark throwing their hats in the ring for leader of the Liberal Party of Canada? Do you think they'd be good leaders? Do you think they'd make good prime ministers? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. I'm really hoping to get around 700 subscribers by the end of January. And with that being said, have a great day.